You know, I've been having this kind of thought about the Bad Boy Pistons over the last couple of days. You know, since episodes 3 and 6 of the documentary of The Last Dance, I've had myself asking myself this one question out of anything else. Did Chuck Daly approve of the roughhouse tactics of the Bad Boy Pistons? Now, I asked that question to illustrate the big theory about what I'm about to talk about in this video here. I don't know, or I don't think that Chuck Daly necessarily approved of the roughhouse tactics or the flagrant fouls or the cheap shots that guys like Isaiah Thomas, Bill Laimbeer, Joe Dumars, Dennis Rodman used to do on opposing players during the late '80s and the early '90s. You know what I mean? But the one thing I did know about Chuck Daly was is that he was a tough-minded defensive coach that preached defense more than anything else. And when he became the coach of the Pistons in 1980 in 1983, the Pistons before they were the physical defensive type of team, they were a high scoring team that would score at least above 110 points. I should say 114 points per game. Okay, and when the Pistons met the Knicks in the first round of the playoffs in '84, they were a high scoring team and they would score points in bunches, but they were not a sound defensive team up to that point. And he helped change the dynamic of the team. When Chuck Daly talked about in this quote here in 1985, he said, end quote, when Jack McCloskey hired me, he wanted me to do something about the Pistons defense. Frankly, I wasn't sure what I could do. They won 39 and 37 games 2 years before I got there. I looked at the tapes of those games and I thought Scotty Robertson, the coach beforehand, did a good job. I didn't know how I could improve on it, but I had a contract with 2 guaranteed years and an option for another year. And if they wanted me to work on the defense, I work on the defense. Now, the one thing that I really respected a lot about Chuck Daly was is that he was willing to play a more of a slow down tempo game because he recognized that playing a fast paced type of game was going to lose a lot more games than win a lot more. And so he said, in quote, he thought about, you know, why not change the why not change one style of basketball and change it around the entire playoffs? And the more I thought about it, the more I knew that slowing down the tempo was the way to go back then. Everyone wanted to run up and down the court and put up big numbers. By slowing it down, we could frustrate the rest of the league. Our identity was going to be our defense. Our offense, we wanted to establish a half court game that could produce about 100 points a night. Our goal was to play every game if it's as if it were a playoff game. And the big thing that really made the statement during that time is when Jack McCloskey was convinced by Daly to trade Kelly Tripucka, who was one of their best leading scorers, for Adrian Dantley. And what it did was is that they allowed them to play more of a slow down tempo game because you could put the ball inside to Adrian Dantley's hands, and he could use his fakes and his feints in the low post and get to the free throw line. And so, and then also they did a really good job of accumulating players to play that slow down tempo style, drafting Joe Dumars in '85, John Sally in '86, and also drafting Dennis Rodman in the second round, and made the big trade of getting Rick Mahorn from Washington. And so I think that when you look at Chuck Daly's, career in hindsight, he was really good at, you know, convincing management of drafting the certain amount of players that would work well for a slow down type of system that was going to be beneficial for, to win a lot more ball games rather than just worrying about, scoring a lot of points and having fun doing it. But I think about all these things here is because I've had the thought that he approved of more of a physical type of defense to start to slow teams down, but I don't think that Daly necessarily approved of the roughhouse tactics. Not necessarily me, you know, the cheap shots, undercutting, the opposition's legs while they were in the air, illegal screens, chopping down on the opposition's forearms, tackling dudes in midair, those kind of things. I don't think that Chuck Daly necessarily approved that. But again, unfortunately, that Chuck Daly died in 2009, due to pancreatic cancer. So unfortunately, we cannot, go directly to the man and ask him that question necessarily per se. But when I really think about it, when Chuck Daly became the coach of the Dream Team in 1992, you know, he was still the coach of the Pistons of that time. I should say he resigned from the coach of the Pistons, but he had a relationship with Isaiah Thomas. And I wondered to myself, did Chuck Daly knew that the reputation of the Pistons and of Isaiah Thomas was just you know, too negative to deal with, and more importantly, was it going to ruin the vibe of the team? Now, necessarily, Isaiah Thomas built a reputation, of being a backstabber and being a con man, and a lot of people in the league did not respect him for that. And when you got Magic Johnson, who had issues who was with Isaiah, Larry Bird, who had issues with Isaiah, and then you got Pippen and Jordan that had their own issues with Isaiah Thomas. I mean, the optics are not good, man. It just doesn't look good. And I asked myself this question, you know, the big two things. Did Chuck Daly approve of the roughhouse tactics of the Bad Boys? And plus, if he were going to select Isaiah Thomas to play on the Dream Team, was he going to be ready to deal with the consequences or the blowback from a lot of the players that did not want to play with Isaiah Thomas? And I don't know the answers to those questions. And like I said, that Chuck Daly's dead, and we won't be able to go directly to him and ask him that question. My theory would be, I think that he knew what time it was and what the league was basically saying about the reputation of the Bad Boys. And basically, he had to basically coach what you got. You can't just change, an overall team type of system by trying to suit to what the was what the league was rebelling against. And so he had to play the card of the physical, type of style of punishing defense, and had to deal with the consequences of what, his players were doing on the court. You know what I mean? That's why one of the reasons why Bill Laimbeer is kind of, blackballed in NBA circle to a certain extent to what because of his reputation that he had built. And people had this very dark, you know, eye look when it comes to Isaiah Thomas. You know what I mean? Because of the things that he, patrolled, and the things that he ordered on his teammates, I should say, to necessarily use all the roughhouse tactics to get after on players. That's just the truth of the matter. Now, that's kind of my theory per se. I think that Daly necessarily didn't mind the physical defense. I just don't think that he approved of the roughhouse tactics. Hurting guys during the game, because I think it would have taken way too far to a major certain extent. Now, you know, I think that's my personal theory on the matter. I- It's just that it's a very complicated situation because Chuck Daly is an honorable man and one of the great coaches in NBA history. And everything that he was able to do for that Bad Boys Pistons was remarkable. But I really would be if I were had the opportunity to ask Chuck Daly that question, that would be the one question I would ask him more than anything else. And considering what has been released about the Last Dance documentary, and then what you've seen from the Bad Boys Pistons documentary a couple of years ago, you know, I, those were the things that would ask him the most. But it is what it is. You can't turn back the clock and ask him those questions now. You understand what I'm saying? But let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. Do you think that Chuck Daly approved those roughhouse tactics that the Bad Boy Pistons did? They were successful in doing it and they won championships out of it. But do you think that he necessarily approved it because of what the reputation of the league had on the Bad Boy Pistons? But what I mean. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section, and keep on the lookout for more videos as I continue to post them. All right, y'all have a great night.